With me, fan representatives for the AFC North champions, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jackie and Ben Jennings here. Thank you guys for being a part of this interview, and I'm so glad to have you guys here.
Hi, Earl. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I know you guys were diehard Steelers fans, so I thought, who better to have on the show representing Steeler fandom?
I named my son Ben.
There you go. That's all there is to it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's an iconic name, especially when you think of among Steelers fans and things like that. It's like how people in Baltimore name their son Brooks or grandsons Brooks.
Or Tucker.
But I wanted to ask you, how did you two become diehard Steelers fans? What led to the attraction to being a Steelers fan?
Well, personally, I mean, my mom grew up in Pittsburgh. She's been a fan her whole life. So I was just kind of born into that big fan myself, and she's a big fan, so I thought I might as well go with it. So
Yeah, I was born in Pittsburgh, so I didn't have a choice. And when you grow up in Pittsburgh in the 70s, you live and breathe and eat and sleep Steelers. And then, Ben didn't have a choice either.
In your memories, what iconic moments stand out as Steelers fans?
All right, so I'm going to go way back. So I think, any catch by Lynn Swann in the 70s, any catch by John Stallworth in the 70s was an iconic moment. The Immaculate Reception, obviously the iconic Steeler moment. But I think for me, the biggest moment was the Jerome Bettis fumble in 2005 in the AFC playoffs. And then, devastation followed by complete elation and winning that game. It was just, it was amazing. It still gives me, heartburn and chills all at the same time.
personally for me, 4 years ago, the Christmas Day game, Steelers-Ravens, playoffs on the line. Quite frankly, the best Christmas present I've probably ever gotten was to go to that game and seeing Antonio Brown stretch the ball across the goal line with under a minute to go. It was probably one of the best in-person football moments I've probably ever experienced.
Nice that we could experience it together.
Yeah.
With my husband, his dad, who's a Ravens fan, so that just made it so much.
Yeah.
Going into the season, what were the expectations like? I know missing Roethlisberger for pretty much all of last year, Mason Rudolph coming in and quarterbacking, Mike Tomlin was still able to get them to 8-8, even with the difficulties they had. What were you thinking the expectations were, the record was going to be going into this year?
I don't think after the Roethlisberger injury and his age, I don't think I had any real expectations. I think I thought we were going to be lucky to go 10-6, maybe. Did you have a different expectation?
Well, I mean, last year, like you said, going 8-8 without future Hall of Fame quarterback is very impressive to do. It really showed how our defense really stepped up. Prior years, like 3-4 years ago, our defense was by far the biggest liability on our team. And so going 8-8 with Big Ben last year gave a lot of hope for this year. Of course, super easy strength of schedule considering our positioning last year. We didn't have to play teams like the Chiefs or the Patriots. So still had to, of course, play the Ravens and even the Titans and the Bills. And those were close games, but it's really our defense that's been really stepping it up for us. So my expectations were definitely higher, and I think 12-4 where we're at now is probably a good area of where we should have been.
Was there a point in the season that you felt they were going to make the playoffs? I'm assuming, especially an 11-0 start would definitely make things very optimistic. But any time earlier on in that streak that you think, okay, this team's really good, it's good enough to not only contend for the AFC North, but to win it as well?
Well, certainly. I mean, of course, going 11-0, pretty much clinching a playoff berth with that 11th win helps a lot. But even earlier in the year, especially that game against the Eagles where the emergence of Chase Claypool really happened, where he scored 4 touchdowns. I mean, it really solidified like a good opinion on our first draft pick. Of course, we didn't have a first round one because of our trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. But yeah, that beating the Titans and the Ravens, and I believe back-to-back weeks, was certainly forced a good outlook on the rest of the season, beating two pretty elite teams.
And I was actually surprised how good Ben looked for being out most of last year. I really thought he would struggle coming back.
Was there a point in the season that you were worried that they weren't going to make the playoffs? I know still, again, going 11-0, you don't think, okay, we're not going to make the playoffs. But I guess in this variation of the question is, were you concerned heading into the playoffs?
Heck yeah. I mean, the whole Thanksgiving, Ravens have COVID. We're going to delay the game to, Saturday. Then we're going to delay the game to Sunday. And then we're going to delay the game to Tuesday. And then who knows if we're going to have to. I mean, after it just all went downhill.
Absolutely. It really, after that 11th win, it wasn't a question of worrying about going into the playoffs. It was more of how are we going to fare in the playoffs. Losing Dupree and Bush to torn ACLs, it really depleted our linebacker core, and certainly losses to teams like the football team and the Bills, and even shouldn't have been close game against the Ravens. It was concerning on how we would play in the playoffs against teams like possibly the Chiefs or the Titans again or the Bills again. So that's sort of what makes me as a fan worried.
I think we're still concerned.
Yeah.
Looking at the playoff matchups, who do you feel the Steelers match up the best with, regardless of all the teams in the AFC? Who do you think that the Steelers would have no issue taking care of?
At this point, I don't think we can say anyone. I mean, I'm glad we're playing Cleveland in the first round, right? I spent the first 30 years of my life hating Cleveland and the last 20 years feeling sorry for them. So I'm glad they made it into the playoffs, but I don't know. Hopefully with Ben back, we can do a little better than we did Sunday.
Yeah, certainly. A draw against Cleveland is probably the best thing that could have happened. I mean, they're a team with very little playoff experience, whereas we are headed by a quarterback with 2 Super Bowl rings under his belt. So that's great. And even looking to the past week where we ended out the season versus Cleveland, we had Mason Rudolph, who is by no means a starting quarterback, throw for over 300 yards, which is sort of a game plan the Steelers will probably look to take into action in the wild card weekend with Roethlisberger, considering he's throwing anywhere from 40 to 50 to 55 times a game. So it's good to see that we're going to be able to do that. Just got to be concerned about that running game, and especially the Browns running game as well with our depleted linebacker group.
What's the team that you don't want to see in the playoffs? I know everybody's been talking about Kansas City, but is Kansas City the team Steelers fans don't want to see in the playoffs? Is it Baltimore? Is it Tennessee? Is it even Buffalo? I mean, is there somebody in the AFC that really scares Steeler fans?
Yeah, well, for me personally, it's Baltimore because of our household dynamic here. My husband and I have to watch this game in separate rooms, sometimes in separate locations. So personally, for me, it's the Ravens, but I think academically, it's Kansas City.
Well, yeah, looking at the playoff picture, if the Steelers are to beat the Browns, they're going to play either the Bills or the Colts, I believe, is their matchup. And really, that's the next game I'm worried about. The Bills, I think, are more threats than the Chiefs. The Chiefs have looked vulnerable at times. They had that loss to the Raiders. They've looked vulnerable against the Panthers, the Dolphins, the Falcons. I think they're a beatable team, but the Bills are scoring so many points per game. We just saw this past week. They put up 56 against Miami to end their playoff hopes. So I think the Bills and Chiefs are definitely up there, and they're going to be some of the teams that come out of the AFC to the Super Bowl.
Another question I have, especially before we go on to the predictions, the biggest question is life without Ben Roethlisberger. I know last year was sort of a taste of what could happen if Roethlisberger calls it quits, and he's around. He was in the same draft class as Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers and things like that. So it's almost getting close to 20 years of playing in the NFL. Are there concerns about whether Mason Rudolph could carry this franchise into the future once Roethlisberger is retired?
So, I mean, Ben doesn't know a Steeler team without Ben Roethlisberger, right? So, and again, after the Super Bowl domination of the 70s, the 80s and the early 90s were a rude awakening for Steeler fans. So, yeah, it could get really ugly really fast.
Absolutely. And I don't think Mason Rudolph is going to be the predecessor to Big Ben by any means. I think we're going to have to look other places, whether that's trading for someone like Sam Darnold or maybe taking on a hefty contract like injury-prone Carson Wentz. I mean, or even in the draft, maybe a quarterback will fall to us who has some decent caliber. But it is pretty scary not knowing if Roethlisberger will be at the helm or not, considering how banged up he's been. Even this season, he took a hit against the Cowboys and he had to come out for a couple drives. So I really don't know what to expect without Roethlisberger or what moves will be made in order to, sort of come back from his inevitable retirement.
Yeah, even if he comes back next year.
Looking on to the predictions, I know the Super Bowl, it's still ways away to determine who's going to come out because you never know what's going to happen. But right now, on the spot, if you had a choice to determine who's coming out of the AFC, who's coming out of the NFC, who will win that matchup, and what will the final score be?
I mean, out of the AFC, I truly think it's going to be the Bills, Chiefs, or Steelers. As a Steelers fan, I sure hope it's going to be Pittsburgh trying to get to that stairway to 7. In the NFC, each team has their sort of good areas and their bad areas. Green Bay chilling at the number 1 seed. They had a good record last year, but then were ultimately defeated by the 49ers, who are also a good team and headed to the Super Bowl. The Saints, I don't know how they will fare without Kamara possibly for a few games, considering he's on the COVID-19 list. Seattle's looked shaky at times. So I think if I had to pick a team, I think the Buccaneers are going to come out on top. I think they destroyed the Packers earlier in the year by 28 points. They get easy first-round matchup against the football team. And I could see them winning the NFC Championship game as well. So I'm going to say Steelers and Buccaneers are going to be in the championship this year.
I would like to see a Steelers Green Bay rematch. But I could do Steelers Saints too. 2 black and gold teams wouldn't be a bad thing.
Who do you have coming out winning those matchups?
It's got to be the Steelers. It has to be the Steelers.
I had to at least keep you honest on that. At least if...
We're not going to say otherwise.
Well, Jackie and Ben, I really appreciate you being on this show and being in the podcast. Before we go and before we wrap up, I wanted to know if you had anybody you wanted to give shout outs to, anything you wanted to promote while you're here.
Absolutely. I just want to shout my own company, Ben 10 Sneakers, on TikTok and Instagram. Also, shout out to my mom for getting me on the podcast, along with my Aunt Karen, who texts me during every game, and the Hulu crew at Annabelle's, Joe and Ashton. I appreciate them as well.
All the Steeler fans out there.